I just don't want to get all sweaty. I hate nature! Okay, so this is for my Golden Afternoon OP. I'm using two patterns for this. The first is this McCalls 7654, kind of just a basic, kind of a sweetheart bodice. Well, not really a sweetheart, but it's just a strapless bodice. I'm only using the top portion. I cut my own skirt length and I didn't bother with the sleeves because I'm also using this NewLook 6599 pattern. I wanted to go for more of like a tuxedo dress kind of idea. I did a modified pattern for this and I think I'm gonna go more along this kind of cut line with the ribbon details, and I also changed the button band so it would close all the way up. And I'm not using this collar. I think I'm going to draft a Peter Pan collar to go with all this. So that's what I'm using. Also for this project, I am using this really pretty red floral cotton. I don't remember exactly where I got this. I think it was Hobby Lobby. It's been in my stash for so long and I'm not really sure where it came from, but it's very soft and it's kind of thick, which is what I like whenever I'm sewing a Lolita dress because I want them to be a little bit more sturdy so I can get more wear out of it. And then I also have this really soft, like cotton shirting almost. It's more of a cream color. It comes off kind of white on camera, but it is cream. I got this at Joann's and I got a lot of it because I'm also using this for another project that you guys will see in my lookbook when I get around to posting that. So these are the two things I'm using, and let's get started. I'll show you guys the main bodice pieces for the floral fabric. This is again from the McCalls 7654 pattern. This is the size 14, which I think is the largest size on this pattern. I typically cut the largest size because your girl's got boobs. Anyway, I've got a bodice side front, a front piece, and the back piece. I'm gonna leave one of the side seams open because I want to put the zipper in on the side. As you can see, there's no darts or anything since it's more of a princess seamed bodice. And I've actually cut 4 of each of these. Well, I cut 2 of this one and then 4 of each of these as I needed lining pieces. I don't know if I'm going to interface them. More than likely I will, just because it makes for a better finished product. But here's all of our pieces and ready to go. Okay, so I'm back at it. I actually had to go out and buy more interfacing because I didn't have enough of the apparel weight, but I'm back. I got my interfacing attached to my outside fabric and I got everything pinned together. This is actually the back seam right somewhere. Oh geez. Is it? No, back seam's over here. My bad. Okay, so I had my 2 back pieces with the seam in the middle sewn up, and then my 2 side pieces and my front piece. Again, I did it this way because I want to put in a side zipper underneath the arm because I think it's going to look nicer in the end. So this is my lining, and then my outer piece is pinned together in the same way. So I'm going to sew these up and then we'll move on. Okay, so I got everything sewed up on the bodice. I'm actually going to wait because I want to serger all of the inseams so it'll be a little bit cleaner. Before I switch my machines and before I work on the top part of the bodice, which would require my changing my thread color, I'm going to go ahead and sew up the seams of my skirt. My skirt's really easy. It's just a rectangle skirt. I cut 3 23-inch long pieces from my fabric, and I just cut all the way across on the fold to get as much yardage as possible. I'm going to sew each seam up on this side with the sides together and leave one side open so I can sew it to my bodice. So I'm going to do that first, and then I'm going to go ahead and hem the bottom. I think it's just easier since it's a rectangle skirt. I don't have to worry about a curve or anything, so I'm just going to do a double fold hem on the inside, just like that. And that's just a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier to take care of. So that's what I'm working on next. Okay, so I thought I was filming when I sewed up my side seams of my skirt, but apparently I wasn't. However, it's just one straight seam. It's real easy. See, I just sewed in far enough to where the selvage would be covered when you unfold it like this. Oh my goodness, doing things one-handed is hard.
Okay, so see, now you can't see any of the selvage. I was about to hem my skirt, but then I decided, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna grab my serger and serge these seams and the seams of my bodice, and then just serge the bottom hem. So I only have to flip it up one time. I mean, that seemed like the lazier way to go about this. So my serger's out, ready to go, and it's white thread, but it takes so long to thread this that I didn't see any point in switching the colors out. So I'm just gonna use the white thread and clean up all my seams. Okay, so just finished with my serger, and now all of my seams are nice and clean. Just to get a little bit more of a close-up, you can see this red thread was my original seam, and then I just finished it off with my serger, so that way when I open it up, they're all nice and clean. I will go ahead and press these, but as soon as I'm done with that, I'm gonna flip over the bottom edge of my skirt hem, and then I can switch my thread out on my main machine, and I can go ahead and sew the top part of the bodice. Okay, so I've got the skirt seam taken care of, and I'm getting ready to switch out the thread in my machine to this kind of cream color to match the top. I just wanted to show you guys real quick the patterns that I use. This is again from the NewLook 6599. This actually has 3 pieces, and the only piece I actually cut to size is the yoke piece that goes on the front. This is my front and back pieces. As you can see, they're really quite small. The regular pattern pieces, it's actually a full shirt, so I only came and cut down to about 1 inch below the arm seam. It's just so I can attach it to the main bodice. And yeah, hopefully this will turn out pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and get these parts sewn together and then probably work on the sleeves. I still need to draft a Peter Pan collar, but I wanted to sew up these seams first. So let's get started. Okay, so I got the front seam with the yoke sewed. I actually had to redo this one because I sewed them with the wrong sides together instead of the right sides together because I'm dumb. But anyway, that's finished now, so I'm going to go ahead and sew up the shoulder seam so I can measure out how long my collar needs to be. And I'm going to go ahead and do the side seams on both sides because while it's open on the red bodice, the red part of the bodice, the zipper won't go all the way up to the arm seam. It's going to start about 1 inch below that. So I feel confident I can go ahead and do this. Once that's done, I think I'm going to go ahead and do the sleeves and the cuff before I do the collar, because the collar I have to measure and cut and interface, and the button band, which won't really be functional buttons on the front, needs to be finished. So we are going to take care of all that. Okay, good morning. I am back at it again with my coffee from Starbucks, ready to go. This morning, I meant to start filming and I didn't. I apologize. But this morning I'm cutting out the button bands. These are just 2 10-inch by 4-inch pieces of fabric and interfacing. And then I'm just going to sew those to the front of the yoke pieces to make buttons, although I'm going to use snaps instead of buttons because I hate making buttonholes. And then I cut some interfacing for the sleeve cuff. The pattern doesn't call for this, but with how just kind of loose this fabric is, I really wanted a little bit more structure. Now I'm going to draft the collar piece and cut that out so I can do all of my interfacing at one time, because I hate doing one and then coming back and doing one and coming back because I have very small space to work with. So we're gonna do that. Okay, so here is my top part of my bodice piece. As you can see, I sewed together at the shoulder seams, and then down here is the seam for the front and the yoke. I actually put a piece of graph paper underneath this so I could mark the center point in the back, and then I just traced along this line for a general shape. I'm gonna add about 1 inch here, just or maybe like ½ an inch in order to close the outside and also to account for the button band because I want it to kind of overlap a little bit. But now, since I have my basic outline, I can go ahead and draw out my shape, how wide I want it to be, and then I'll add a little bit of seam allowance on the outer side. Let me get that drawn out and then I will show you how it looks. Okay, so I cut out my collar piece and then pinned my top bodice and my main bodice to my dress form just to kind of see how it looks. And I think I dig this because this is a 3-inch collar with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I really think that 3 inches is going to be a good size because I'm also going to have some ribbon and lace detailing across the top. I've also seen that the sizing of this upper bodice with the lower bodice is really going to work out. I'm hoping to sew it right along this yoke seam and it'll line up over here. I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. I think what I'm going to wind up doing is my zipper will start about right here. So this seam, part of the seam will be closed, and then just the zip all the way down. And then across the back looks pretty good, fairly even. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and cut out this collar piece and interface it, and then I will get to sewing. Okay, so I got all of my pieces interfaced, and now I've got everything pinned with the right sides together. My collar piece I'm gonna sew along the outer edge and the long outside edge, so that way I can turn in on the inner edge. I just pinned it here so my fabric wouldn't slip. I'm also gonna sew this with the interfacing down on my machine so it feeds a little bit smoother. For the cuffs and the what is the word I'm looking for? The button placards. I'm just gonna sew the side edges right here and then flip them out and iron them so that I have a nice crisp seam, and then they will be ready to be sewn on to their respective parts. So let's get started. Okay, so I got all my pieces sewn and flipped around. I actually used my pinking shears on the inside to trim the seam up so it lays a little bit flatter. I have my button placards pinned to the front of my bodice. Pretty much what I did is I just folded in this edge a little bit, probably like 1/4 of an inch on each side, and then just sandwiched the thread in between, or the fabric in between. And I'm just going to sew as close to this edge as I can to catch both sides. I'm going to sew these placards on, I'm going to sew the collar on, and then sew this top of the bodice to the red bodice with the lining on top of it, so when I flip it all around it'll all be together. And then I will be ready to move on to the sleeves. So here we go. The top part of the bodice finished and the collar added and edge stitched down. I've also added the button plaques, and now I'm trying to add it to the top of the bodice. I actually had a little trouble with this earlier. I sewed way too far down, so the top of this bodice sat like mid-chest. So I had to take it all apart and kind of refit it. In the end, I'm actually going to have to take off this bottom part of the sleeve and just leave it open right here instead of sewing down the cream, which is fine because once I add the lining to this, it'll close it off and it'll look really nice. So I'm going to sew this on first, and then I'm going to flip it over this way and then add the lining on the underside, if that makes sense. I'm kind of sandwiching this in between. So let's get to the machine. Okay, and here we have my finished bodice. It is lined and I need to press it a little bit because it's buckling right there. But other than that, I think this turned out pretty good. If I could zoom out. There we go. So that is finished. I'm going to move on to the sleeves, which will require some hand sewing because they have to be gathered along the top part of the sleeve and the bottom part where the cuff is. So I'm going to get started on that. And back over here at my desk, I've got my sleeve pieces. This is just my basic sleeve. As you can see, it's really wide, so I'm gonna have to gather along the top and along this bottom edge. My cuff pieces were originally only about 12 inches long. Just for more ease of comfort, because I'm going to be wearing this in Orlando at the end of May, I added another 2 inches just so it won't hug my arms so tightly. And I'm going to get to gathering these. I'm just going to do a long machine stitch along the top and then just gather it down and pin it to the bodice. But I think I'll start with the bottom edge and do the cuffs first so I can leave my bodice on my mannequin. So we're going to do that. Okay, so I have my sleeve pieces prepped and ruffled at the bottom. I'm just going to throw just a straight stitch in the bottom, and then I'll be able to fold the cuff over to cover up that raw edge, and then I can gather the top and sew it to the bodice. Then all I need is the skirt, the zipper, and any little additions that I want to throw on, and I'll be pretty much done. Yay! Okay, I have my cuffs flipped over and then flipped over again. Usually I would hand sew this. I'm feeling really lazy tonight, so I think I'm just going to edge stitch right here along the seam to keep them in place, and I think it will look just as nice. So I'm going to do that and then run a basting stitch along the top together and pin it to the bodice. Okay, I got my sleeves added on and the cuffs are finished. The gathering at the top, it's gathered more on the front side than it is on the back, just for it's a little bit more of an ease of fit for me. And I tried on the bodice by itself. It fits me really well. I'm debating about if I just want to do one snap up here at the top or just leave it open. I mean, why not? Let's be risque, why don't we? The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and gather down my skirt and sew it to the end of the bodice here, and then serger that seam, and then all I have to do is toss in the zipper, and for all intents and purposes I will be done. So real close to the end. Okay, so before I put in my basting stitches at the top of my skirt, I wanted to share with you guys a little tip about gathering a skirt, especially for Lolita fashion. Most Lolita skirts are a rectangle skirt, which means it's just one really long rectangular piece of fabric, and then you gather it down. Instead of doing one long basting stitch all the way across, split it up into quarters. I actually folded my fabric and I marked with a pin 1/4 section, and then I have a half section in here somewhere in this massive fabric. But that way, when I get to the pin, I'll stop, make a long tail, cut my thread, and then start again. And it's just a little bit easier, so that way, you know, when you're sewing on, or when you're trying to attach it to your bodice, you're not trying to, you know, you have too many ruffles on one side and not enough on the other, and it just makes it a little bit easier. So let's put in that basting stitch. Okay, I have a mess of fabric on my desk now. However, underneath all this is a dress, I promise. So I've put my basting stitch in the top of my skirt piece. As you can see, it's easier to see on the right side of the fabric, just that long basting stitch. To do my basting stitches, I just put my machine on the longest stitch length, and then I reduce my tension down to about a 3. I usually sew on a 4 or 5, so this just kind of makes it a little bit easier to gather. So I've got all my basting stitches in, and now I've pinned my skirt to my bodice at the end and in the center back, on the side seam, and in the center front. So it's been quartered really nicely. Now all I have to do is gather down each skirt section to the section between the pins, and when doing this, use lots and lots of pins. If you think you've used too many pins, use more, because you want to hold those ruffles in place as well as you can. Once you put it on the machine, it's going to be a little bit harder to sew through because it's going through so many layers of fabric. But yeah, just take your time, gather carefully, don't yank on your threads too hard or anything, and I will show you guys what it looks like when we're done. Woo! Look at all those gathers. Yeah, and like I said, lots and lots of pins. So, I will say one thing I like about using 3 times my waist measurement for fabric is you get this really full skirt. So I'm going to take this over to my machine and do a 1/2 inch seam allowance when sewing this down. I'm going to sew with this side down. It's a little bit easier to go through my machine that way, and I can keep the ruffles from flipping over and not getting sewn down correctly. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to pull out my serger, serge this hem and the inside of the top of the bodice where I put on the sleeves. And then all I will need is a zipper and a couple little things on the top, and I will be finished. Yay! Okay, so I got the waist seam and the inseams on my dress sergered, and now the last thing I have to do is put in my zipper. I'm using a 12 to 14 inch white invisible zipper, and I just wanted to show you guys a quick tip about sewing with these. First thing, you're going to want an invisible zipper foot. You can get them on Amazon for like $4 or $5. But the most important thing, and this took me a long time to learn, is that when you sew these, you want to prep your zipper by ironing out the coils so you can sew as close as possible without sewing over them, which makes it really hard to zip up your dress. You will not believe how long it took me to figure that out. But yes, I'm going to iron out these coils and then pin this with the right side on the right side of my dress, and so that way when it zips up, it'll fold out and then it'll just zip up and be invisible. So yeah, let's do this. Okay, so I have got my zipper pinned into my dress. I just wanted to show you guys. This is the wrong side of the zipper, and I placed it with the teeth facing out. So it's right sides together, teeth facing out. And then when you sew right along the seam and zip it up, it'll flip over and hide your zipper. So let me get this sewn on, and hopefully I can sew it straight to where my threads won't get caught in the teeth and then I have to pick it out and then redo it. So here's hoping. Okay, I got my zipper in and it zipped up on the first try. I'm so excited. I didn't have to go back and rip anything out. It does get a little caught here at the waist seam just because it's so bulky, but that's to be expected. So hang on, let me see if I can. Ooh, look at that zipper action. You didn't see because I was pointing the camera outside. Sorry, I only have 2 hands. But yes, my zipper went in. So now I'm going to close up the rest of this side seam and look into seeing what kind of little decorations and stuff I want to put on the front of this. Probably some ribbon and a little bit of floral lace. And then I'm done! Yay! And here it is, our final product, my Golden Afternoon OP, named after the Golden Afternoon sequence from Disney's Alice in Wonderland, which is a major inspiration for this project. It's really turned out way better than I expected. I didn't follow my exact initial plans, such as being able to button up the top or adding the lace details, but I do love this floral lace that was added, the fluffy sleeves. The fit is so comfortable and it's very lightweight. Considering I live in the southern part of the United States, I can wear it outside in the summer and not die of a heat stroke. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, a comment if you have any questions or want another project. Hit that subscribe button, hit the bell to know when I update, and I will see you all very soon. Bye-bye!